Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts of the Week. This is so fun to do for me. I am super overwhelmed about the feedback we've gotten from this podcast. We've had so many downloads here just the last week since I started this podcast, and we got over 130 reviews on iTunes. We ranked number 13 in the business section for a little bit because of the boost I got when I launched it. And so I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for spending your time listening to the podcast, and for everybody who's giving me feedback. Thank you so much for letting me know that it brings value to your life. I just really want to start with that. So thoughts of the week. I started this podcast because I wanted to give some of my insights to life, but also just hear from some really cool and interesting people, which we've done so far. And thought of the week is really me start analyzing, what in my work as a coach and a mentor, the things that I hear. And it's a really good correlation between one of the questions that one of you guys asked me out there and between what I got to experience this week. So I'll read the question that Eric asked me. He says, something I'd like to hear in your podcast, the cover. And so the cover here is what he refers to as back in 2014. I had a fitness cover in a magazine back in Denmark. And on the cover of this, it says Nick Olsen, living the American dream. So that's what he's referring to. It says that you're living the American dream. It would be interesting to hear your point of view on your American dream then versus your American dream now. I know you briefly touched on your point of view changing in your podcast zero on your first new podcast, but a deeper dive from your viewpoint on the pursuit of true happiness would be really interesting to hear. And I really appreciate that question because it's such a loaded and good question, but also one of the biggest reasons why I even started this podcast. It is this, like, what is happiness and what does happiness really look like? And the main thing that I learned this week, even, what I learned this week, well, when I say what I learned this week, it really comes back to when I am in the zone and I'm talking to people, like, their information, like, dumped in my head, things I haven't thought about before, like, in a context that I've never actually articulated something before. And that's when I know that, I'm in flow. And the flow state is something that has really interested me. And I read this one book about this a couple of years ago that described the flow state. And I'm like, what is this? What is this flow state that they're talking about, And so I started thinking and reading more and more about it and started looking at it in my own life. And really when it comes down to it is when you have certain behaviors in your life. I've talked about this before, the 6 pillars of life, which is my last week. I think I said relationship twice, so I apologize for that. The last one should have been career. But when you have these six pillars of life, and you diversify your attention into all of them, which means you take care of your basic needs, not your wants, but your basic needs in life. The needs to be fulfilled in certain areas where we don't have this lurking negative energy that's constantly infringing on our present. When we get to that point, then all of a sudden we're allowed to have flow state, which means that whatever we engage ourselves in, at whatever point of time, we can feel like we're just part of downstream living, where things are just easy, things to come together. You think about someone, they text you, you want to make a certain amount of money, and all of a sudden there's a check outside in your mailbox or a new project dumps in. That's what's called being in flow in life, right? And at that point, this is where just true peace and true joy, that state of where you are just living in the moment and you can be present around you and you just feel love all over, like that's for me is just true happiness. So the pursuit of happiness really has to all come back to that. And this week I was down talking to a group of people. One of my mentoring clients, she started a retreat center called Soul Power Wellness. And this place is for people who either have eating disorders or just in general have issues with controlling their food. And we've developed this program over the last 6 months, Holly and I, and it's been such a beautiful thing to do because Holly has been through all these different treatment centers and approaches to how to do how to really like treat you, right? It's institutionalized treatments and are very clinical and will cut you off from from your loved ones or the things you like to do, and they'll just isolate you. And so she took a different approach, and it's really beautiful to build with her. But anyway, so I was down talking to them, which I do once a week, and we're sitting there engaged in a session, and I got this one question from one of them. It's like, I just don't get it. I get all these thoughts in my head, and I get these triggers and these negative emotions, and I just can't escape myself. And it was really well put, because I feel like this is one of the things that prevents people from being happy. We get in this mindset of just feeling like we are our thoughts, we are our actions, we are our habits. Which, yes, on an abstracted level, like how life responds to us, that's true. But that doesn't mean we can't change. You say people can't change, but in my opinion, people can change. And here's why. Here's how I see it. When we're born, we are born with a beautiful spirit. And I don't care if you want to call it spirit, energy, whatever you want. I'm not overly religious myself, but I am a spiritual person. And so we're born with a certain energy, a pure energy form, an energy form that's full of love. And this is who we get to experience who we really are when we are in flow. But anyway, so when we're born with a brain. Our brain, the way I see it, is kind of like a neurological processor. So basically like a computer processor that we get to set up and wire, right? But when we're children, we don't have that power, which means we're completely dependent on our parents or the people around us to make sure that we have a good environment where we can, neurologically carve pathways in our brain that are healthy, right? And this is what's supposed to be like a happy childhood and all these other things of where we're supposed to do that. But we can experience some trauma, and there can be different trauma at different levels, anything from sexual abuse to being yelled at by a parent and not feeling loved or something, and all these things and all these behaviors and all these things that we're perceiving as children carve neurological pathways in our brain. Okay, so the processor of our energy has to go through these pathways. And when they're created us when we're children in our brain, and they're not supporting who we want to be, or keeping us in a flow state, well, our job when we grow up basically is to neurologically change those pathways. And it's very, very doable. It's like you've ever been in love, like your first love, for example. If you look back at that, if you're not married to the person right now, but you didn't think you could even live without this person, right? You couldn't sleep, and you were just so in love. I remember my first one. I mean, oh my goodness, I was gonna just live with her the rest of my life. And then, a year later, I'm like, who? Who is that? I don't even remember that person. You get over things, and that's because a neurological pathway was created with that person. But then all of a sudden, it's gone because your focus shifts, your energy shifts, and as soon as that happens in your brain, neurologically, you will have a different wiring, which means that you can basically break anything if you just change your focus. You are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings, you are not your actions. All these things are just how life responds to us, but really you have the power to change all of these things. And so what we were talking about was that, well, it's a lot of times it's a choice. It's a choice of stopping. It's a choice of just accepting who we are as people, and just being okay with that, because we don't think we can change, but we can. We can change whatever we want to. It requires persistence in the long run. And sometimes if there's PTSD, for example, or real trauma that's happened in the childhood, making sure that we're not locked onto that narrative and that story that we used to have. We bring that into the present constantly, but that's done through self-awareness. So really understanding these things, and yes, it takes time, and yes, you will lose a lot of battles, but it's only failure if you stop trying. And so that's really what we got to talk about. So when you come back to the question, like, what is true happiness? Well, before I got here, true happiness for me, when I looked at the American dream, was, okay, we got to accumulate a lot of stuff. America's the land of opportunity. I got to go there, and I got to make a bunch of money and create a life for myself and status and fame and all these things. Do you think about in your early 20s, right? And I got here and I got my career off and things were going great, right? But then all of a sudden, boom, get divorced. Crap. Well, now we got to look at life a little bit different. This is where, there's pain is a catalyst for change always, because we get to reflect and we get to look at things through contrast. And so when I started looking at my life, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I've got two beautiful children that I still have. I'm so grateful for my life. I have a great career I've built up. I can move forward with this. I can move forward with my mindset. So let's go. I'm just going to refine myself. I got to get better. And as I've done, I've read hundreds and hundreds of books. I've gone to seminars. I've done so many things. The best work I've done to myself is just figuring out habits that keeps me aligned. Keeps me aligned so I can tap into flow. Because when I can tap into flow, I can tap into other people. I can give to other people. So the difference between where I was at, before was, it was all an illusion. Stuff is just, complete band-aid for you either not knowing what you want in life, not knowing who you are, or an escape from pain. And that's really what stuff is. That's the way I see it. There are certain things we got to have in life in order for us to have the kind of standards that we want. But it doesn't mean we have to have 7 cars and a Lamborghini, like a Toyota drives just as fine. And that's really the mindset shift that I went to to saying, okay, well, what's really important to me? What are my priorities in life? What kind of behaviors do I have to just stay in this flow state? Because being present is the most beautiful thing ever. When you're with your children, you can absorb their energy and you can stay there. You can feel that love. You can feel that peace, right? And that's one of the most beautiful things. And when I see, a lot of my clients are very, very wealthy people. And there's some of them who really crack the code on this and really figure this out. What true happiness really is at the same time as having success. They have all this stuff, but they never sacrificed their relationships around them. And they were okay. They just surrendered into how much money they had to make. And you know what? They worked their butts off and did all the right moves and they ended up in the place that they wanted to be. And it's beautiful to see because they're both happy and they have the worldly success. And those are the real role models to me. Those are the true happy people. But I also see happy people who have absolutely no money. They just have each other. Which means that, okay, well, what's the common denominator here? It's not stuff. It's not status. That's fleeting. The common denominator here is to have people. It is to have behaviors that all leads back to you, to your flow, to your alignment, to things that are important to you, making sure that you're fulfilled in everything you do in life. And I understand that there are some things that are hard to break out of, but really you're in full control of that. You're in full control of making sure that you understand that neurologically in your brain, you are not your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are constantly trying to improve and be better. And why is that? Well, if you're here in this world to contribute to others, to be part of a system, right? Well, then you have to be that change. You have to be that change in the world, or else you're never going to get that life that you want. You're never going to get those feelings that you want. So if you're not willing to sacrifice anything, you're not going to get anything. Because, like I tell my clients, you can try be in the mindset of just being, half in, half out, but you really have to be in where you are 100% willing to sacrifice everything in life to get what you want. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice anything, though. I'll say that again. You have to be in the mindset of being willing to sacrifice everything. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice anything at all. I mean, how cool is that? It's just a state of mind, just knowing that I fully surrender into myself and I unconditionally love myself. And that way I can unconditionally love other people and my life and my circumstances through gratitude. And for me, that is what true happiness really is. And that's really what true happiness is all about. And I really wish that more people could just step back, take a diversified look at their life and fulfill themselves and being willing to give up certain things for a period of time in order for them to make sure they're fulfilled in all the 6 areas of life. That way, you can stay aligned, you can stay balanced, and you can contribute to the world. And yes, you will also have success at the same time, which means that the happiness, joy, success, all those beautiful words, but they can all be congruent when there's alignment, right? And this is not some spiritual hocus pocus or anything, Like I'm a very practical, logical person, which means I have to have science-based back things up, and studies and research and all these other things. And this is my approach to life. And everything backs it up, from quantum physics to studies that they've done through people, EKGs with people's brains and brain scans when people's change focus. So this is real stuff out there, okay? This is not just something I'm saying. It's something that I see with my clients over and over and over again. It's a state of mind. It doesn't happen over 10 years. It happens in an instant. It happens with a decision. When people make a true decision to change in the moment, change happens. Yes, you have to, sometimes fake it till you make it to really step into that new person that you're creating, that you want to be through those new habits in your brain. But really all that is, when you step back and look at it, you're just optimizing your processor in your brain in order for your beautiful spirit to energy, love to penetrate that brain and being processed the right kind of way. That's really all that is. When you do that, when you're in alignment, when have ethics, you have true happiness. So, Eric, I hope that answered your questions. Question for what the difference was and how I really see true happiness. And there's a huge correlation with health as well, and which we went over in my episode 0, my episode with Ron, for example, too. We talk about these things. And so that would be my plea to you guys, and my challenge to you, like I challenged you last week to go to a nursing home. My challenge to you for this next week is to just start appreciating. Just sit down and close your eyes for 10 minutes and really start looking at your life. If everything is the way you want it to be, if not, are you willing to sacrifice anything to get there? In that 10 minutes where you close your eyes as well, just see, what do you want to change in your life? What kind of person do you want to be? I want you to write that down and then really step into it. Really start creating behaviors after that new person that you want to be. Because that's really where your happiness starts and ends. There's nobody around you who's going to do this for you. You can't victimize yourself. Every time you're a victim, you give up. So stop the victimization, pinpoint those things down, and start owning your life. That is my plea to you this week. That is my challenge to you this week. And again, I appreciate everything you do out there. Please share this episode if you got something out of it, and review it. And if you have some feedback, again, if you have questions for next week's Thought of the Week, I would love to hear that as well. Thank you so much for listening in to this round, and I will catch you next week.